Welcome to the spooky season. Now this is what we're going to do. We're going to create a pumpkin, cut a face in it, put some stuff inside that looks a bit slubbery and glibbery, make a little cloud coming out and put it in a magical environment. Beautiful. So let's get to it. We're starting with a V-sphere, creating a few subdivisions, shade smooth, and jump straight into. Right now I'm trying to figure out a brush that is sort of giving me the right shape of a pumpkin. I'm thinking this might be all a bit too smooth still, so I'm going into the profile and change it. So the normal profile usually looks a bit like this, probably a bit more symmetrical, and I then changed it to a brush profile that is more like this. So these edges here create a much sharper edge of the brush, and that way I get a bit more refined creases on the pumpkin. So we start again, and you see this now looks a lot harder than it did before. Yeah, that's a good start there. And we go to a smoother brush profile again to just work the top a bit. Yeah, and with control you can reverse the brush option, so instead of having the clay brush coming out, you just push things into the object like so. And I think it is shift. You can also quickly smoosh, bit of schmoozing. You can on the fly switch to the smooth option. Gee, my English is really broken right now. It's late, apologies. Anyway, switching to the crease brush to just sharpen up those edges that sit between the little bumps that come out here. Why not add a bit of detail there? Same for the top, just working out those creases really, and make it more look like a pumpkin. Beautiful. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Now I set my 3D cursor to the top of the pumpkin, create a cube, and in edit mode I just pull out the top polygon, Ctrl R to add some edge loops, and then right click, add subdivisions to create a denser mesh, and we're back in the sculpt mode, where I'm now smoothing the whole and then yes, it's good more. All right, I might just jump ahead here a little bit, because the technique here is the same as with the pumpkin. I'm pretty much just using the sculpt brush, the smooth brush, and the crease brush really, or maybe the grab brush as well here and there, to get the shapes that I want. So there's no real magic here. I swapped to the edit mode, selected the center polygon, enabled proportional editing with O, and then rotated everything around the z-axis and leaned it slightly to one side to just get this coil type of shape. Why not? So I'm just going into the pumpkin now with K, the knife tool, cut in some eyes, and now I do the same with the mouse. Beautiful. Now we swap to W, R, yep, to paint select the polygons that I want to delete in a second. So paint select is much faster than just clicking polygons by myself. Press X, delete faces. Beautiful. Now I'm going back to the sculpt tool, use the smooth brush to just get rid of those vertices that stood out a bit. I'm giving this pumpkin a solidify modifier, and it reveals a few ugly spots there that we will take care of in a second. With the solidify modifier, activated, I created a first material for the outside of the pumpkin and then a second material over here for the inside of the pumpkin, and make it a bit brighter. And then I went in here, so I'm in the solidify modifier, and under materials gave this a offset material and a rim material. The first material, the outside one, the orange one, is slot 0, and the yellow one is slot 1, and both use slot 1 right now. What we get by using these settings, we have an inside and an outside material. A little bit of cleanup, selecting some of the vertices that caused the trouble with the solidify modifier, either deleting them or dissolving them or merging them with existing vertices. It is really up to you how you want to go about it. As long as it looks nice in the render, it's fine by me. Yeah, I think with that we are done with the cleanup. Let's check how this looks. Yeah, much better. All right. Adding a bit of subdivisions there with a subdivision modifier, getting a bit more high-res on the mesh. And now we're going into the insides, creating a plane. So we created the plane, we subdivided it here, and then we created a modifier, display, but for display to work, for displays to work, we need to feed it a texture. So I named it inner pumpkin, just so there's no confusion, and then we create a clouds texture, which is just a procedural texture to deform everything. The size and depths and strength and whatever settings, you really just have to go with what looks good over here. Cool. Naming the pumpkin materials, give it the pumpkin's inner material, and I import a pumpkin seed. So the pumpkin seed here, as you can see, I took it from a different project, brought it into my scene. There's really no magic here. If you zoom in, I mean, you don't even need to have a texture here right now for what we're using, mainly because it's going to be a detail inside the pumpkin. Square, slime, selected. We created a particle system, so we went into this setting there, and then we press the plus button to create a particle system, and we set it to here. All right, and then under here we go to render and set it to object, and in object we select our seed, which is this one. Got a terrible arrow. Here we go. This one there, easy. And it distributes already on the surface, and now we're just gonna play with the settings a little bit until we are happy. Activate advanced up here so that we get access to rotation. I wanted the rotation to be a bit more random, and with that I can do that right here. All right, reduce the count a bit, play a bit with random scale and distribution seed, and yeah, that is good. Now we place it inside the pumpkin, go into the displacement mode, make it a bit stronger, then switch to edit mode, and really just with proportional editing pull the whole thing a little bit into place so that we have nothing poking out. But also on the inside, we want things to sort of sit nicely, and we duplicate the slime screen now and just place some place until we have all areas of the inside pumpkin filled with slimy skin and pumpkin seeds. Yeah. So I'll just fast forward a little bit here because the process is the same for each of these. Beautiful. Yeah, there's necessary things in place. That looks good. One more, maybe. Why not? All right. Last one perhaps for the bottom. Yeah. Good, beautiful. Now we're creating a curve, a Bezier curve, rotating it so I see what I'm doing. Go in edit mode and just create a shape like so. Duplicate it and just line it up a little bit with the first curve until we have something that looks a bit like hanging slime strings of sorts. All right, select all of them, Control J for join, so they're all like one curve now. Increase the thickness down here. Under bevel, you will find geometry, bevel, and depth. That's actually sort of the thickness of the curve. And then we go remesh as a modifier and play a bit with the voxel size on this until we find something that is pleasing. I would always advise as soon as we talk modifiers and simulation and everything, it's good practice to make sure that at some stage you press Control A and set your scale here, because that sometimes can mess up how modifiers work and simulation work, etc., etc. Place this inside the pumpkin, and again I'm gonna fast forward a little bit here because it's just distributing this thing over and over inside the pumpkin until things really look nice. I'm just making sure that things, if they touch each other, that they don't end mid-air, but that they really have an anchor point, either another string or the wall of the pumpkin. And yeah, that looks pretty good. Beautiful. Setting some lights. I wanted sort of like a backlight feeling, so starting with that, have a point light inside the pumpkin. With the strings selected, I'm playing a bit with the translucency and the subsurface attributes of that. It's a bit silly, to be honest, because you notice that we're not even in the render mode, we're just in the previous mode right now, preview, and materials behave a bit different when you switch over to cycles and at times even Eevee. So let's just proceed this as a preview material, so we have the mood at least covered, but we expect to be tweaking the materials more later on once we're actually in the render engine that we will use for our final render. All right, with the pumpkin selected and also the outer material for the pumpkin, we're adding a noise texture and put that into the bump node and then into the normal slot for our principal BSDF shader. And then we just play around a little bit with these settings until we find something that we like. So it's so that our pumpkin is not so perfect and smooth, but is lumpy. I like it. Good enough for now at least. Can always tweak these things later on. And as you see, now we're in cycles. Obviously that the inside materials look much different than in preview mode. Right now I'm just playing a bit with tone and color palette. Do I want to go for something that has some poisonous green in it, or I don't know, do we just go with like a typical warm cold color palette where we have a nighttime situation and then the warm. All right, so we're going to create our smoke simulation now. So I'm creating a cube here. I make sure that the base of it is sort of just below my ground plane that is all over here. It can be on the ground plane because in this case they're sort of both flat. It wouldn't make a difference to the simulation. So with the cube selected, it obviously obstructs my view right now. I can't see the pumpkin. So I'm going into the object settings right here. And then on the display, I'm changing it from solid to wire, and that allows me to see my pumpkin again. So I'm scaling it to a size that I think would be enough for the smoke that comes out of the pumpkin to spread, because I don't want it to spread forever. So I will give it a lifetime and then it will dissolve. Right now, with the cube selected still, Control A, and we will apply the scale. This is important for many things, not just simulation, but also any modifier. It can just screw things up if your scale is off. It's or better if your scale is not 1. So, and as you can see here, the scale is applied. I'm having actually different objects selected, but it's good practice to do this for all objects. Apply your scale and you're much better off. So, I have missed it, skip my selfie right now in this review. So, with the cube here, this one here, the domain selected, I went into simulation, and over here activated fluids, and then type flow, smoke, inflow, and inflow allows us to have a constant creation of smoke, so it just keeps coming, and that is what we want. Right now, however, we also see that everything goes up, and that is not what we want. We need the smoke to come down, right? And now for the smoke to go down, this is an important settings. Remember, the smoke was going up at first and then just sort of lingered on the top of the domain. We want it to go down and also come out of the mouse. So for that, we need to set negative values under the gas settings for the domain, the buoyancy to negative values and the heat to negative values. So let's see how this looks. Yep, and you can see it goes down. Beautiful. Nice. So right now what I've done is I selected my emitter object, which is effectively just a copy of the base of the inside slimy square of my pumpkin. But I stripped it from everything that I don't need. No hair system, no particle system, no pumpkin seeds, nothing. I disabled its primary visibility by going under visibility, array visibility, and uncheck camera. So it will not be rendered, but the smoke it emits will be rendered. Beautiful. I also set it to wire like we done with our domain. Over here, with the ground plane selected, I go back into my simulation settings and activate fluid and set the type to effector and effector type collision. Solicitation, that would be something. No, collision. So that way, if we now play the simulation, the smoke will collide with the ground plane, and it will look at this stage very similar to just, gathering at the base of my domain here. But let's say the ground plane would be a hill, which is what we're going to have. And my pumpkin sits up here, right? There it is, beautiful. And out of its mouth comes the smoke, and it will actually flow down and then hit here. And rather than keep going down this way, it will then go this way. Beautiful. Just give it some good names, because good names are our friends. And although I want the smoke to come out of the mouse faster, I don't want it to spread very fast in general. I want it to be like vapor, and like it should have very little weight and therefore a lot of like air resistance. So one way to go about it is just reducing the time scale of the simulation, and I set it to 0.3, so everything should be about 3 times slower as it was before. And now with the pumpkin selected, we go back into the physics settings, activate fluid, and over there, effector and collision. And now we see that it's not penetrating the base of the pumpkin anymore, but rather oozing out of its mouth. And that is what we want. Right now I'm just playing around as well until I find something that looks somewhat good. That is just way too aggressive, so we just go back down. Still a little bit too much. It's coming too much out of the eyes, really, so everything is just too powerful right now. Yeah, and it's also hitting the edge of the domain here, so we've gotta be shifting things around a little bit there. Yeah, getting there. Noise, by the way, you're in the domain, and you can go and activate noise to just create a little bit more detail in your simulation, so things don't look too smooth, like all these little pockets that we see here. Noise really helps you there. And now I'm just bringing the emitter of the smoke closer to the mouse and sort of in an angle that shoots more directly towards the opening. I increased the resolution now of the simulation, so it's just an attempt to see what does it look with more precision, with more detail. But it comes at a cost, obviously. Things are very, in fact, I like it. So let's just go into Eevee, not Eevee, to go into cycles. If you don't see anything in cycles, it is because you have to give your domain a material. Right now, I can't see my smoke, right? Because there's no shader applied to it. So what you have to do is go to your domain and create a material. And what we want to create is a volume shader. Okay, principal volume. We chuck that into the volume slot of our material output. So rather than showing the entire process of how I created this tree, because this node setup, I might just explain how it works. So this here is the color of my smoke. It's just, I wanted orangey yellowish tones in there. So, and initially I didn't see the colors the way I wanted them, so I used the map range to manipulate the density. And some of you look at these values and you're like, you just shake your head, and you're right. I did not really know what I was doing here, which is why I cut out the entire shader creation. There might be much better ways to get what you want, but I got the colors that I wanted. That is what counts to me. Then this whole area here is for the density. So for the density, I used a gradient ramp, and I wanted the, sort of to be able to see inside the mouse. And then as the smoke sort of ages and moves away from the pumpkin, I wanted the intensity to increase, and it becomes more rich and less see-through. That is pretty effectively what this is doing here. Yeah, let's just do it again. However, there's a problem. The color ramp has an output of from 0 to 1, and my density can go much beyond 1. So I used a map range to say, hey, my range from 0 to 1, or in that case 1.1, should be sort of reprojected or expanded so that I can go all the way to 32, which in my case just created this sort of richness that we see over here, and 1 probably would have been sort of like something like in the mouse. So that way I just had a good control over things actually into this. And that multiplier node here, it's just what it's doing. Whatever the color ramp and the map range do afterwards can be multiplied with this value down here, so I don't have to sort of go all the way, tweak and balance these two nodes. I can just say, now I want more or less with just one value tweak, and that's always a bit nicer to simplify the process. And then we do the same with the emission. I just wanted to have a little bit of glow to the smoke, so same procedure down here. This feeds into the emission strength, and I also have one connection coming out here into the emission color, which is just a copy of the color of the smoke, really, so that we don't get white. Phew. Okay, that definitely confused me. I wish I could explain it a bit better, but this is just what it is right now. All right, I think it's time for set dressing. So before we go too far, what we see up here is Blend Kit. It's a free add-on. I recommend it because it's making it much easier to just play around with ideas and quickly set dress your scene. So I typed in ground, and there's now we just look what we find. It will place the selected asset where your 3D cursor is. So in my case, it's at the origin, and there it is. And there you see, I'm scaling it up. Beautiful. Just jumping into my camera, placing my camera to something that just feels dramatic and nice. And I'm liking this. So right now I'm going into the edit mode. And there's a slight delay because it's quite high density. And I am grabbing the center polygons of that geometry, enable proportional editing with O, and then increase the radius of the edit to just pull enough polygons around those center polygons with me to create a little hill. Go back into the sculpt mode, which handles high polygons much better, I see, and just massage things a bit in place so that, I don't know, just so that I just get the shape and form that I'm after, really. I duplicate the ground plane now and merge by distance to just reduce the poly count, because this is going to be, as you see here, my effector for my smoke collision. As I said before, I want the smoke to come out and then out of the mouse and then sort of like trickle down here, that hill. And I need it to know that there is something to collide with. And we've done that by setting the low-res version of the ground to fluid effector collision. And it being low-res obviously processes faster than the photo scanned version, and we will also set this to invisible, so we deactivate primary visibility so it's not rendered, and we will set it to wireframe so it doesn't obstruct my view. Now here's my domain. And we're just checking what's going on, and I see that it is clipping. The gas is clipping through the ground there. Yeah, so, and I see now that it still keeps clipping through the ground. It's almost like it is not seeing the effector that I set, and I can tell you already that here is planar is a setting that will resolve this. Took me a bit longer to figure that out. It is because this is a plane, so to say. It's not flat, but it is a non-manifold object, meaning it has no thickness to it. And by activating this setting, the simulation will just treat it the way it should be, and it will work. So as I said, I will figure this out a little later. I kept set dressing, and I will spare you all this because in the end gave up on this approach, and I will explain you in a moment why. So let's just quickly skim to the end of this. So the problem that I have with this setting is that I was always wondering, what is this here in the background, like this skyline there, right? It's coming from the HDRI that I used, and I was always wondering what is in the background. I always want to see like yes, there is our pumpkin here, but it felt like I was drawn into the more into the deep, and that was not really working. Also, what is not working is the scale of pumpkin and trees. They're just way too skinny. Like everything felt really empty, and I sadly did not record it, but this is the setting that I ended up with. So I just got rid of everything that was too much in the distance and really focused on a very shallow setting, and no HDRI. Let's say this way, there is only lights around the pumpkin. Everything else is just black. To just stay focused on the foreground, really. Just to swap forth and back. This is what we had. I did not like it too much. And this is where I'm like, yeah, this is going the right way. I like this much more. So we have a few foreground elements like the mushrooms. I don't wonder what's in the background really, because I can't see what's behind really these trees there. So I'm liking this much more. And as you can see here in the orange cube, that is a container for my sparks, so to say. So let's just quickly talk you through that. Yep, here we go. So I created a really low poly, what is it, a geosphere with its minimum settings, because it's so tiny that we really don't need high poly particles here really. So this is the spark. It has a emission shader to it, so it glows nicely. As you can see here, strength is set to 33. And in my sparks container, so it's the cube that emits the sparks, I used a particle system. That this object here is my sparks container. I will go into object settings and straight away say from texture to wire, because I don't want to see it really, to wire. And then I would also create a little, here's my icosphere, not geosphere. And we just go minimum settings, we move this away, just so tiny. And again, we apply Control A, the scale, so things work nicely. Same for this. Then with our particle container selector, we go into particles, press the plus button, and under render we go for object, and then with the pipet we pick our icosphere, and that is that. And then on the scale we can already see that it is doing something. I want everything in the emission to be emitted at frame 1. All particles, all 1,000 particles that we have here are emitted at frame 1 now. And I also want them to be, is it the source? Yes, in the volume. So rather than on the surface, I want them to be in the volume. And that is that. So that's my floaties. So now I'm just tweaking the set a little bit, create more romantic or more magical and mystical proportions really. So I wanted giant mushrooms and less twigs and branches, because they were creating a lot of detail behind the pumpkin and I did not like it. Tweaking the bump map a little bit on the pumpkin. I needed more detail. It's in the process went way too smooth. A good tip here is Control B to just select your interest region, so rendering, so you don't render the entire image all the time. And that looks pretty good now. So right now I'm just playing with the lighting a bit, and you can see that I hit everything that I don't need for that, because I was working predominantly on that top light here and see if I need it, because I already had a front light. So the front light is sort of somewhere here and the top light is right above here shining down. I just want to see if a little kicker from above is doing something. Cool, so just balancing those lights a little bit. And again, this is just me just mucking around a little bit. Probably a bit too much than I should be. But yeah, sometimes you get trapped in the details. So this is what I ended up with. A little bit of magical glow on the mushrooms, bit of old leaves on the ground. And yeah, so if you like this tutorial, give it a thumbs up, share it around, subscribe to the channel, and I see you next time.